love and compassion. Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally in your life's search for love and wisdom. Our old friend Rumi. This is the first series in which we begin to weave together two of the 5 essential ingredients of the higher self. The meditator weaves love and compassion into a nice pattern so that they can work together. This helps us to get to know ourselves better so that we can open the door further and let more of the sunshine in. Let me start off with a quote from the Dalai Lama to emphasize their importance. Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. This is true because love is the basic vibration of the universe, which we surf on, and compassion is our ability to overcome the fears of our ego mind so that we can better express our love and connect with the people around us. Tell me more about what love is. To experience love is to be truly alive and connected, and to actualize our deepest and most innate capacity. Love is the greatest, most powerful force in the universe. There is a paradox. We hold a fear that love will weaken us and make us vulnerable. In many ways, this can be true, but it can also be, as Lao Tzu wrote, being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, while loving someone deeply gives you courage. In our day-to-day lives, love helps us go beyond barriers, providing us the ability to cross that line that creates an us versus them mentality. Love enables us to come from our hearts, to reach out to others. It allows us to go beyond our conditioning, to be open to experiencing both the pleasure and the pain of others. Our meditative practice, for sure, helps us to love. This capacity is hidden under the veil of fear and illusion. The beauty is that through meditation, we are returning to our true home, learning to be gentle and inclusive rather than exclusive. It is a practice of truthfulness rather than make-believe. This capacity for love is based upon wisdom. We learn to see things as they actually are and to return to who we really are. A love relationship. And to be sure, while you're in your ego mind, a love relationship is like a roller coaster ride. And there's this wild and crazy attraction and repulsion and distraction and testing and back all over again and again. A big part of the challenge is that there are 3 types of love: sexual, possessive, and true love. And they all seem the same at times. Then there's shifting between the ego mind, wanting control, and the higher self providing relief in the form of just wanting the love to be. And if you eventually find a groove, this wild dynamic can begin to calm down and find its own balance. But that will probably not last long. Change is a key part of truth. However, being in a state of enlightenment can sure help provide a lot of relief. If your partner becomes enlightened, then that is a whole new ball game. Tell me more about compassion. While we're in love, compassion involves the quivering of the heart toward pain and suffering, our own and or another's. What comes with this is a feeling of wholeness and sufficiency. Nurturing our compassion makes us big enough to take in emotional energies without being fragile, shattered, or losing all faith. Without compassion, we lose all sense of purpose because we lose connection. We become alone. Compassion is best illustrated when we open our arms and hearts to embrace. Compassion is love in action with a feeling of oneness. meditation. Let me invite you to sense your body right now. Now, take 3 gentle breaths. I invite you just for a moment to feel a sense of love and then a sense of compassion. And breathe it into your heart. And now for another 3 full breaths. Great job. Thank you. A quote from Eckhart Tolle. True compassion goes beyond empathy or sympathy. It does not happen until sadness merges with joy. The joy of being beyond form. The joy of eternal life. Loving kindness and compassion meditations. The first round of loving kindness meditation is self-directed. We extend loving kindness or compassion toward ourselves before we go on to other relationships. We do it this way because we are a radiating light out to others. If our light is dim, we can only send out weak rays of love and compassion. Our loving kindness and compassion meditations get our hearts going so that we start glowing brightly, radiating our love and compassion to others all around us. Silence brings out our emotions. Love and compassion fill our bodies with emotion. In our sessions, we provide many stretches of quiet to allow those emotions to be experienced. We can acknowledge the places where we are stuck. Inevitably, we all will twist ourselves into knots when we try to bypass certain feelings and perceptions. The love that would otherwise be available to us becomes withheld. When we set an intention to explore our emotional hotspots, we create a pathway to real love and compassion. Meditation does not eliminate mental and emotional turmoil, but rather provides space, gentleness, and intimacy to experience them. We develop a constructive environment for relating to our emotions and thoughts. Then we find freedom in how we live our lives instead of letting fear bind us up into these knots. It is a process of accepting your feelings and allowing them to be there. Don't self-judge by labeling them bad or wrong. Simply name them as painful. Create the space for them, even if they are uncomfortable. Don't take hold of your anger and fixate on it, nor treat it as an enemy to be suppressed. Let difficult feelings simply be there. By being gentle with these feelings, you can face them and allow your awareness to work on them and heal. Be aware and open. It is so critically important to permit yourself to be aware of your own anger, fear, resentment, or whatever is there, instead of spiraling down into judgment, such as, "I'm a terrible person." Instead, you make a gentle observation, something like, "Oh, this is a state of suffering." This acknowledgement opens the door to a compassionate relationship with yourself, which is the real foundation for a compassionate relationship with others. We cannot use willpower to create the thoughts and feelings that we want to arise, but we can recognize them as they emerge, by turns, frustrating, mixed with fantasy, painful, changing. By allowing ourselves this simple recognition, we can transform our relationship to feelings. This changes everything. We can begin to flow and be open. Remember that progress in emotional life is not about repressing negative emotions. Progress makes feelings malleable. Instead of feeling hard as steel, they become gauzy, transparent, and available for investigation and rewiring. Since there is so little of our true nature in our ego mind, we need to keep energizing the neural pathways that can receive the spirit energy to experience love, which helps open up our hearts. We allow love and compassion to resonate throughout our being. When we quiet the ego mind, our higher self is opened. We can resonate with newly reinforced images and experiences, and from there, we can make choices on how we want to live our lives. It will come. Sharon Salzberg tells a story about the impact of loving kindness. She had been planning to stay for a full week at the Insight Meditation Retreat Center that she had just established with some friends in Barre, Massachusetts. During this week, she planned to do the loving kindness meditation every day for a few hours. Towards the end of the week, she noticed that she was no longer feeling any different. In fact, she was very disappointed that the meditation seemed to have no effect on her in any way. All of a sudden, there was a call to the center. One of their close friends was in need of help in Boston, so they all packed up to provide support. In preparing to leave, Sharon hurried upstairs to her bathroom to pack, and when she grabbed a glass jar, it slipped out of her hand and fell on the tile floor, smashing into 100 pieces. Her inner voice exclaimed, "You are such a klutz, but I love you." Now that response shocked her, because it was an inner response not typical of any she had ever experienced before. At that moment, she realized that her meditation had taken hold. Getting our higher self and ego mind to work together. In our compassion and love exercises, we work on the two sides of ourselves simultaneously, both our higher self and our ego mind. While we teach ourselves to become more centered in our core awareness, we are training our ego mind to become an assistant in the process so that the two parts of ourselves can work together. This is the key to living out an amazing and purposeful life. I want to draw on Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's work, which shows how we can create behavior patterns within each day, which she refers to as micro moments of connection. It's when you share a genuine positive feeling with another living being. Examples are, it could be laughing with a friend, or hugging your neighbor with compassion, or it could be smiling at a baby. It doesn't even need to be your baby. Science suggests that these micro moments may be more powerful than we think. Research finds that when one person smiles, gestures and postures begin to be mirrored by the other person. Synchronization is more than skin deep. When you're really connecting with somebody else, your heart rhythms come into sync. Your biochemistries come into sync. Even your neural firings come into sync. What's more, that biological resonance of good feeling and goodwill has lasting effects. This isn't just about your health, because when you're really connecting with someone else, your heart is getting a mini tune-up, and so is theirs. The more you connect, the more you fortify this wiring to connect, and the more you lower your odds of having a heart attack and increase your odds of living a long, happy, and healthy life. It gives me goosebumps to realize that merely smiling at someone can have significant health consequences. What fascinates me about what Dr. Fredrickson is referring to, which is all scientifically based, is the fact that when our higher self is expressed through positive human connections, we stimulate the higher self in others. We're all connected and are part of a whole. And when we charge up human interrelationships, we are able to open our hearts and integrate ourselves with others through compassion. It is a confirmation of our higher self. When we are spreading it around, we all become happier and healthier. This synchronization of biological functioning that Dr. Fredrickson talks about brings to mind two things. One is the derivation of the word conspire, which means to breathe together. In a similar vein, when my ex-wife Marlene was going through her residency in ophthalmology at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, she was so stressed out that she would have a terrible time getting to sleep. When we would get into bed and turn out the lights, I would lie next to her and breathe deeply for an extended period of time so that Marlene would start to breathe deeply along with me, which would help put her to sleep. I never told her that at the time because I did not want her to become conscious of what I was doing. I was conspiring without informing my co-conspirator. Meditation. I now invite you to follow your breath for a few moments. Just let go of all of the negativities of day-to-day stress. Now, bring up an image of who you are at your very best. Consider yourself at your most kind, in your most loving state. Take time now to imagine your ideal self while breathing gently. Great. Thank you. Compassion toward a hated person. It is so essential that we reflect on what it means to extend love and compassion toward a person with whom we're having a very negative relationship, whether at work or in the personal sphere. This negative person could be your manager, coworker, family member, or acquaintance. This negative relationship may generate anger or even hatred. This is the most challenging segment of the loving kindness and compassion series. How can we hold someone we hate in our hearts? The Buddha said, anger, with its poisoned source and fevered climax, is murderously sweet. And of course, his most powerful phrase, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. These fascinating and complex images describe an emotion that carries great pain, hurt, and sometimes pleasure. With such complexities, and given such overwhelmingly strong emotions and conditioned responses, how do we overcome these burdens and heal? The most effective way is to turn within, because we have an infinite supply of love and compassion to draw upon. Luckily, the light of awareness and forgiveness, made up of love, is available to us as well. We must remain compassionate toward our own emotions and experiences so that we do not sit in judgment of ourselves while going through this process. It's also important that we do not ignore our pain in a rush to forgive. We need to be balanced. One of the biggest causes of disease is where people are trying to be too nice to others without getting what they need for themselves. The famous Dr. Bernie Siegel wrote about this over and over again. Our infinite love and compassion give us strength and guidance. Our meditative practice provides us the tools to support this healing process. The great thing about letting go of our hatreds is that we remove their burden. We feel the lightness of being while strengthening our connections with our beloved community. If we're all one at a deep level, then we can reconnect through love with others and experience deep peace. The reality of our deep mutual connections is so much more substantial than the disputes we have with people. Words have meaning. Eskimos have 52 words for snow. And the reason is that it's so important to them for their survival. Sanskrit has 96 words for love. Ancient Persian had 80, Greek 3, and English only 1. The fact that English has only one word for love tells me that the ego mind has been dominating our culture for way too long, weakening our awareness of the subtleties of love. Once our communities become more heart-centered, we will start inventing new words for love and their many facets. Maybe a good way to start a new trend is to let the people around us know how much we love them. I was recently on a conference call with a group called Happy You, led by Lionel Ketchian, when a gentleman told the story about how he committed to telling his wife a new reason every day why he loved her for one whole year. There were days that he thought he couldn't do it, but he pulled it off. He said it did wonders for their relationship. Can you imagine if we all did that? How much that would change our world? This man's year-long love interchange with his wife reminded me of the high school teacher's exercise with her students. There is such magic that can be created when you become overloaded with love. Meditation. Now take a few gentle breaths. Now think about 3 things you love about yourself. Take another few gentle breaths. Now think about someone you love very much. Think 3 reasons you love them so much. Now take another few gentle breaths. Thank you. The love movement of the 1960s. This discussion takes me back to 1967 during my open arts days leading up to the Summer of Love that year. It was called the Love Movement, and it was stimulated for just the reasons we've been discussing before. There was a painfully severe love deficit in our society. Love was hardly expressed anywhere. This point was highlighted by a famous photo of a young hippie walking up to a U.S. soldier. The soldier was trying to protect the Pentagon building in D.C. during a Vietnam War demonstration. The hippie placed the stem of a flower into the soldier's rifle barrel. The incident prompted the phrase "flower power," and the new battle cry was "make love, not war." That period was also influenced by the hippie movement, And as you probably guessed already, I was a hippie, a very responsible one. I'm very proud of the major issues that were being raised back then, which are very popular now too, such as the love and care of the planet, ecology, vegetarianism, the care of the body through proper nutrition, inner peace and meditation, and the value of Eastern wisdom traditions. Even the use of psychedelics is now starting to show great promise in treating depression and addictions. Their use have been demonstrated in formal, FDA-approved clinical trials. The substance psilocybin in microdoses is showing positive therapeutic effects. Overall, the period of the 1960s had strong spiritual messages, and one was a growing awareness that each of us has a higher self, a higher consciousness. The spiritual pursuits to discover the higher self were split between psychedelic experiences supported by popular music and the growing widespread interest in meditation. The positive spiritual shifts from that era are definitely being felt right now. There's a momentum building towards a culture that will fully appreciate the value that our inner work can have in helping to make our lives better in our personal lives and at work. The importance of present awareness with love and compassion. Compassion is the part of love that's active. It's the arms and legs of love, which means that our bodies are the vehicles through which love is able to express itself. Without our bodies, love would just be. To fully take advantage of our bodies, we have learned the importance of being aware of the present moment. It is only through the present moment that we can be connected with the emotions that flow through the body as it reacts to our thoughts. If we're not able to feel these emotions as they occur, we become blind to these positive micro moments and will probably fail to build upon them, especially when we're trying to be compassionate. The following is a scenario which gives an example of how being blind to micro moments affect our lives. Here, Joe is trying to interact with Fred in a compassionate way. Joe is being compassionate to Fred in some way. Fred, for some reason, reacts negatively to Joe's compassionate gesture. This brings up some past traumatic event in Joe's life. Joe has a negative internal representation about it. Joe generates a negative thought. Joe's body reacts to this negative thought, generates an emotion. Since Joe is not fully present, which he probably is not, Joe cannot feel the emotions in his body because he's not in the present moment. Joe responds back to Fred without knowing how he really feels because he's not fully present. His responses are totally coming from his defensive, fear-based ego mind. Fred responds to Joe from the same level of disorientation to his own emotions and lack of feelings. The interaction keeps up without Joe or Fred knowing what is really going on. This sad, ridiculous cycle goes on and on. This situation is how we're living our lives in almost all situations everywhere. The ability to concentrate on being present requires practice because the ego mind, unable to function here, wants to keep pulling us out of the here and now. It needs to be there in the past and future. It really requires a kind of steady vigilance to stay present. That's why breath awareness is such a valuable tool. The stop method, if implemented appropriately, would have changed the above-mentioned interchange completely. Ruminating as a way of life. We have long known that negative, fear-based thought processes follow the same pattern over and over again. The more we think about or ruminate on a negative thought, like regretting something in the past, the more entrenched the thought becomes. These negative and traumatic thoughts tend to loop. They play themselves out endlessly. Their neural pathways become stronger, and it becomes more difficult to stop them. This is why thoughts that cause depression, anxiety, panic, obsessions, and compulsions can become so hard to combat. Along the way, these thoughts stir up emotional as well as physiological reactions. In the face of looping negative thoughts, we need to cultivate the higher self with our meditative practice. If we do our loving kindness meditation and compassion practice enough to help make our positive neural pathways incredibly strong, they can become the predominant mindset to short-circuit the urge to fall back into our negative state of mind. Of course, all of the myriad tools and skills you've learned by now will be operational to help create a calming of the mind. Meditation. Let's again do our 3 gentle breaths and imagine loving yourself to bits. Let's do that now. Now concentrate on the region of your heart and imagine your heart is breathing in and out for another 5 breaths. Great job. Practice makes music. When we sit down at the piano and play a simple Mozart piece for the first time, it can be very frustrating. With more and more practice, we're soon able to play it better and better. In the beginning, we really cannot feel the music in its entirety because we're just learning the basic movements of the fingers, the beat, and the rhythm. However, after a certain amount of practice, the song begins to take shape, and we're able to finally feel the music and experience what the composer intended to convey, which evokes joy and satisfaction in a job well done. How amazing love and compassion can be. As we get close to the end of this chapter, I wanted you to read this story because it shows how incredible a person can be and the depths of our ability to be loving and compassionate. The Nurse and the Marine. A nurse hurriedly took a young Marine to the bedside of an old man and said to him, "Your son is here." The patient was heavily sedated. After a while, with difficulty, the old man opened his eyes. The young Marine was standing near his bed, and the old man reached out to hold his hand. Seeing this, the young man took his hand and held it. He wrapped his hand around the old man's trembling hand with care and affection. The nurse brought a chair for the Marine to sit on beside the old man's bed. Throughout the whole night, the Marine sat by the old man's side, holding his hand and comforting him. Occasionally, the nurse would come to check in on the old man's condition and would suggest to the Marine to take a break and get some rest, but he refused. The nurse was touched by the love and affection of the son for his old man. Later that night, when she came in, she heard that the young man was saying a few gentle words to the old man. The dying old man said nothing, but only held tightly to his hand. Toward dawn, the old man died. The Marine released the lifeless hand of the old man and went to the nurse to inform her about the old man's death. After completing all the formalities, she returned to the young Marine and started to offer her sympathies. But the young man interrupted her and said, "Why are you saying this to me?" The nurse was startled by his response and hesitated, and then said, "He was your father." The Marine replied, No, I don't know him. I never even met him before in my life. The nurse was confused and asked, if you don't know him, then why didn't you say something when I took you to him? The Marine replied, I knew there had been a mistake, but you were in so much of a rush, and when I saw the old man, I felt that he needed his son, who wasn't there. When he took my hand, I realized that he was too sick to tell whether I was his son or not. Knowing how much he needed his son right near the end of his life, I stayed there. When someone else needs you, just be there. There seems to be a strong connection between this story and the one about the mother and her son's murderer. In both of these stories, there's a deep connection that develops between two people that is hard to understand on one level, but on another, it makes all the sense in the world. Love and compassion connected these people on a very deep level. It's a very spiritual experience, and on that level of connection, a sense of oneness begins to shine through, and it all starts to make sense.